How did Falcon turn into Captain America? Disney's probably looking at somewhere around a $150 to $200 million loss on this film.
Renegade Online.
Captain America Brave New World, or Captain America DEI, or Captain African American, as Nerdrotic calls him, all of which are fine titles, nears $300 million global. This was last weekend. This was after last weekend, right? It was going to get right up. It was always going to get to $300 million after its second weekend. Reminder that Deadpool cracked $460 million in its first 3 days. Just want to throw that out there, Deadpool and Wolverine. So that's where we were. All right, where we are now, however, doesn't help them. $15 million here. Lowest weekend year to date. Captain America's third weekend, $15 million, and that may be a little bit high, but the problem here, as we can see, it's now at 341. It was just shy of 300 million at the end of last weekend. It's now at 341. Basically, in the last 7 days, guys, between the domestic box office, Canada, US, and the international markets all over the globe, this movie pulled in between $45 and $50 million for the entire week.
You divide that in half for the next week, and you say 25, and you say, well, we're in the trickle stage.
Right. We are. What's your confidence level, Brett, that this movie hits the 400 mark?
I mean, look, what was it? I saw Odin's doubted whether it was going to get to $400 million. I completely believe that. I just look that you have to have people coming back. There has to be people coming back. And those, usually the holds start to be more steady and lower the longer it's out at the theaters, and it's still dropping extensively.
Brett, they haven't even got him to show up for the first time. That's the problem.
That's the problem. Look, the worst part is I saw the bones of an actually interesting movie that was so sanitized it was bordering on hilarious. The sad thing is all of the hoopla around the Sabra character could have been really, really awesome with good casting, and if they had leaned into, I said, they should have made Sabra a bad guy, left her as an Israeli Mossad agent that was also a mutant. And then the people that don't like Israel would love that because she's a bad guy, and they could have leaned into it. It would have been really good. But they cast maybe I don't know if she's good in other roles, but it was awful. Mm-hmm. And I just couldn't believe that there was I will say it was more cohesive than I thought it was going to be, given the rumors about the reshoots and everything like that. They piece it together fairly well, but nobody told me I had to watch Incredible Hulk for the first time in 10 years before I went to see it. So if people like me are out there saying look, unless you've seen the Incredible Hulk in the last 10 years, don't go see this movie, or at least, wait for it to come out on VOD. How do you expect the week to make it to 400 million? It's not going to.
That's part of the problem, is that these movies are not, and the television shows as well. We're going to talk about some of the streaming issues. I mean, you mentioned Paramount Plus a minute ago. We're going to get to that one because there's some relevance there to what you said. But the problem is that all these Disney Plus shows, these Disney Marvel movies, these things are now so embedded in this lineage of films. Even forget 10 years ago. They have a lineage of films and TV shows, Brett, from the last 2 years that most people haven't watched. The vast majority of people, probably 60, 70, 80% of the people, probably close to 80% of the people that went to go see Endgame, that was it for them. We can see by the numbers, especially when you do inflation adjustments, they're not really watching these Disney Plus shows. So when these movies come out, how did Falcon turn into Captain America? What happened here?
It's time to disconnect them. It's time to disconnect the movies and the TV shows. I understand where it comes from. I understand the connections to the way that comic books are written. It's a really, really great concept, but that only works for the people that are diehard into the medium, right? So people that were diehard comic book readers would love to see the crossovers because it was fairly economical to be able to buy crossover editions of other comics and back issues. So that makes sense now, right? But when you're making a big budget movie, you can't do so with the idea that the audience is going to have homework outside of maybe the concept of a sequel, right? Like you can expect people to go to a movie if it's part 2, if they went to see part 1. But if there's television homework, like there's a reason why the X-Files movie, the very first X-Files movie, is actually kind of a marvel in that you didn't need to really understand the X-Files to enjoy the X-Files movie that came out in 1998. Now that's just for a TV show that was on, really, really accessible, because given the time period, everybody watched, linear not even basic cable, just regular 4-channel television.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was part of the cultural zeitgeist in a way that very, very few things are. That might have been true for Marvel prior to 2019, but none of the Marvel streaming shows are as relevant as the X-Files were when it was on the air. And they still made that movie to be something that you could watch having not understanding anything to do with the show.
Yep, exactly. The marketing wing of things knew how to make sure that the writers understood that no matter how great it is, no matter how wonderful it is, if you close the audience down to a small ball, if you're not expanding the pie, you're going to have a problem. We need to be able to sell this movie. And in order to be able to sell it, we've got to make it readily accessible and consumable by the average consumer. This was not one of those films. Not to mention the fact that the hardcore Marvel fans that knew what happened with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that came out on Disney Plus 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, whatever it was, sucked.
Yeah.
It was, and they hated it. I hated it. But here, just to kind of give everybody a bit of comparison, I pulled up a chart here. Brave New World, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, because unfortunately, Brett, that is the movie that Captain America was being compared to even before it came out.
Very rough
performance. Yeah. And then Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, it seems ridiculous putting Deadpool and Wolverine in there, but to be fair, this is what reignited Disney's hopes, right? Deadpool and Wolverine, the MCU is back on track. Everything's fine again. We're all good. Everything is awesome. All that kind of stuff. Yeah. And nope, that didn't work out. And as it stands right now, if we go down here, if we look at the first column as Captain America DEI, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, column 2, forget Deadpool for a second. They started out $16 million behind Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. That's grown now to about 24 million, give or take, 23, 24 million. The gap continues to it's been widening and widening and widening. Now, it narrowed down a little bit this weekend, but still, the point is that Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania should give us a pretty good idea. And with it currently performing about, 15 to 20% behind, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania finished at $463 million. And this is why the likelihood that Captain Falcon DEI is first of all, it's never going to get to 463. It doesn't look like at this point. But this is why the $400 million threshold is in serious question. And it's also why I say, given what we know, how vastly they went over budget, Disney's probably looking at somewhere around $150 to $200 million loss on this film.
Also, they're coming up on harder times because more big movies are going to start being released because we're getting farther into the year. It really shouldn't have had any competition in February, right where it came out. It should have been just that and been left alone. But like I saw that it said that we're like 55% down from last year box office year to year at this time, because last year Dune 2 came out around this time, which I always thought was weird that they released it that early in the year anyways. But
you guys really, listen, you're just being a couple of Debbie Downers. You need to get with it, guys. Snow White is going to make it all right.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.